Greetings, family. Welcome to the Grand Rising Collective. My name is Kyle Dixon, co-host, educator, and entrepreneur for 20 years. Grand Rising Collective's here is to cultivate greatness in ourselves and our community.
And my name is Kayode Bentley, co-host, educator, and entrepreneur for over 20 plus years. My contribution to Grand Rising Collective is to help cultivate that greatness in ourselves and the community through impactful discussions, seminars, and webinars with my co-host, Kyle Dixon.
So, family, we have special guest here, Mr. Akil Bello here, nationally recognized admissions, testing, education expert with more than 30 years of advocating for equitable access to education. So we got a heavy hitter brother here who really has the expertise to talk about what we're going to go into today, which is about educational, the academia, environment, atmosphere, the changes, the policies that are happening. So we got a lot to share with you all today. And education is a huge component between myself and Kayode and just what we promote here at Grand Rise Collective. So this is going to be fun today. I really do. Akil, what's going on, my brother? How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's always good to, chop it up with good brothers.
Indeed. So, like I said, we're gonna jump right into it. So, Akil, man, give us a little background on where you grew up and just how you got into the educational space in this particular way. Because typically people say, they're professors or they're maybe like administration, but you have a different angle into the educational industry.
Yeah, let's see, how far back should I go? I guess you could say I'm an education nepo baby. Both of my parents are educators.
Okay.
My mother's a Haitian historian, and to my shame, she has more followers on Instagram than I do.
Okay.
By 10 times. So, as a man of my generation, I feel bad. My father is a retired college professor and school administrator. So, education, one would say, is I don't know if in the blood is the right word, but I grew up around education. So specifically professionally, I actually went to school for architecture. I went to 3 colleges to get 1 degree. I ended up at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn with a bachelor's of architecture. So highly related to the field of education, clearly. But I was relatively poor, and I, got a job because my aunt hooked me up at Princeton Review. I got a job as a proctor, and that turned into teaching test prep. Did that for 13 years, did basically everything I could do in test prep without taking a full-time job. Teaching, training teachers, all that sort of stuff. After 13 years, I left to start my own business. I ran my own business for 11 years. Again, in the test prep and educational space, and then moved on from doing that into working in advocacy and policy, and that's where I currently sit. That's the short story.
Unique story. Wow. And that sense that like Princeton Review, because like I said, the test prepping, is a huge business that people don't really realize. So like to transfer, and then the architecture too, it's like, wow, like from architecture to test prep to
I never did anything with architecture. It was like it was interesting because I found out that I wanted to be an architect in like the 1900s and like 1901. But being born after that made that difficult, right? Yeah. I wanted to be the architect who sat down with the family and drew the plans and watched the house built from the ground up. That doesn't exist in the 1990s when I'm in school. So I'm getting my architecture degree, realizing that on the horizon of work for me is being an architectural draftsman for 4, 5, 6 years while I build up the experience to apply for the license, right? And making $30,000 a year, maybe, as a draftsman, working 80 hours a week or something crazy. The architectural profession is really hard, especially starting out. And in school, I had started out working as a part-time test prep teacher. And I think I got one of those tax reports that's like, you made X amount last year. Yeah. And so my last year of school, I got a report that's like, you made $30,000 a year part-time last year. $30,000 last year part-time at Princeton Review.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at these jobs coming out as an architect with a degree, maybe making 28. I'm like, that's a hard choice to make. Like, so I went the test prep route. I don't know if, I don't know if the short-term decision would have, how that would have changed my long-term trajectory, right? A career as an architect, sure, you start out on the lower end, maybe it ends up on the better at the long run, right? I didn't really consider those things, but I remember at the time I'm finishing up school and it was a pretty easy decision, come out and make less, working more hours or stay where you were, right? So that's what I ended up doing. And I just went all in into test prep. And here I am 30 years later, still dabbling in it.
Wow. Kayode, I'm telling you, family, y'all not ready. Y'all not ready. This is, and I'm glad you shared that, because of people, again, when I talk to our students, that initial want of wanting or interest in something may not be exactly what you end up doing in your life, but the architecture will help you set up to what you got into. So that's very intriguing.
I mean, there's a huge value to having the degree, to the experience of learning, right? I still use principles of design in presentations that I do every single day. I'm a great presenter. I kill PowerPoint. Like, you can't mess with me in a presentation.
You have to see this man's PowerPoint. I would agree. I've seen it. So it's thorough. Trust.
And the skills of presentation, absolutely, I learned in making presentations in school for architecture. I just didn't enter that field. And if I'm not mistaken, the statistic is something like 40% of people pursue a job in the field they have a degree in. Something like that. I could be off on the number, but it's definitely lower than you would think. Right. But I think the skills that you learn in college are broadly applicable. So there's no real loss in going and getting the degree as long as you don't mortgage your entire future to do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot. Oh man, yeah, that's a bar right there. No, seriously, because with the degree, right? Myself, Kayode, some of our listeners, and some of my students have talked about, well, college is a scam, right? It's degree. What is it really worth anymore? Or why am I, like you said, mortgaging my house, or like what would be considered like a house payment, or or a huge investment on something that I'm not really getting a full financial return on. So could you speak on that as well, like go more into that, because that is something that is heavily debatable. Now you have people on Instagram, people on social media, comparing, contrasting, saying, don't go to college, or, if you do, it's like, you better go to one of the Ivy League schools, because that's where you're really going to get, your prestige and, the value for your money. So could you definitely speak on that?
Sure. My first thought is anybody who says don't go to college, first of all, look at where their children go, right? I want for my children what you want for your children. So if you're saying don't go to college, I need to see that your kids didn't go. Right? Let's start there. Also, I don't want to hear from a millionaire on nothing, right? Like, especially when you have inherited wealth. It's real easy. Like the stories that we're sold on how to get ahead are almost always BS. They put out Zuckerberg as the wonderful entrepreneur, right? Let's try to process the Zuckerberg story.
Yes.
The dude was at Harvard. You know how much money it costs to get to Harvard? Right? So like you get to Harvard, you've achieved something, right? His parents weren't poor, if I'm not mistaken. He ain't come from the slums and get to Harvard. He came from middle-class white America to get to Harvard. So you were already ahead of the game. He got to Harvard, and his roommate, I believe, I don't remember the order exactly, but like roommate lent him $60,000 to start Facebook. When that was burned through, daddy gave another 25, or maybe vice versa.
Yeah.
Right. Let's process that. Daddy had 25.
Right.
Right. Daddy had 25 to break you off something. Right. So I don't really want to hear nothing from you when daddy could pay for you to get to Harvard, and then daddy could break you off 25 to start your business idea you think might be a thing. his dating site, right? Because that's what it started as, a dating site for Ivy League kids. And Dad's like, let me break you off 25 to play with that. Like, I don't know who I call for the 25 to just break me off 25 to invest in an idea. Yeah. So I don't want to hear nothing from him on what I should do with my future, right? I want to hear from the person who, I don't know, came from my neighborhood and found a way to connect with somebody else in the neighborhood who gave them 25 for a business. Cool, let's talk. Because you have a pathway that looks like mine, right? So I think that that's a very different set of advice, right? So you have to be aware of who you're getting advice from, right? A college degree is a credential that says you have learned, you can learn, and you might have a set of skills. There is value to that. There is value to putting that flex out there to say, I have learned, I can learn, and I got a set of skills that you probably want in your business. There is no loss on being able to say that without walking in the room. The question that we do have to ask is it worth it? Is a college degree worth $300,000 in debt? I'm gonna probably say no to that for everybody. I don't think anybody should sign up for $300,000 in debt. I don't think you should sign up for generational debt, taking student loans and parent loans on top of it. We gonna put 2 generations of this family in debt for 1 college degree? Maybe not. Or let me say that better. There is a limit to the debt that it is worth.
Okay.
Right? It is probably worth some debt. I took out $26,000 in loans. Right? And I'll tell you, right? I remember my exit interview, took out $26,000, sat down with the financial aid counselor my last year. They're like, you're gonna pay back, here's the structure, you're gonna pay back 42. And I was, what? That's double. And I thought I had a good interest rate, right? I was like, wait, how's it double? But it was less than a car note. It's less than the price of a car. And it's an appreciating asset, whereas a car is a depreciating asset, right? But also when I graduated in the 1990s, I don't think loan companies did as many games as they do now, right? I think it's become easier for them to do things like, if you pay back $500 a month for 10 years, your loan will be cool. Why don't you go ahead and pay us back $350 a month? So you took out something thinking you're going to pay it back in 10 years. They gave you a structured payment, which is less than the interest rate. So you're paying back $350 and you're not even hitting interest, and you're getting interest on top of that interest. So your loan is growing, not shrinking.
Right.
So I think we have to be, and let me say this really carefully. I haven't dug deep into the loan thing.
Okay.
But I know it is in a lot of ways different and somewhat more predatory than when I came out of school. So you have to be really careful about what loans you take, how you restructure it, anything like that. So I think you just have to be really careful about debt and loans these days, because a lot of things change, even credit cards. In the 90s, there was a hard limit. Anything above, I want to say 20, 25% was predatory, was usury by law.
Remember that.
Best Buy just sent me a store credit card. They're like, look, 29.9%. Go ahead, we good. Like, that's a loan shark.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful. Certain people have changed regulations to allow these things that were never good to become terrible. And so I think we do have to be more careful and bring it back full circle to the college thing, right? So student loans, a certain amount of debt is probably okay. There's an amount I will pay to go to college, right? And it is worth it. What that amount is, what college that is, that becomes part of the entire discussion you have to have and be really careful about.
Ooh, yeah, yeah, kid. You dropped some gems on here, man. You made me think about even my college experience. I went to a HBCU, private, Fisk University, and I had student loans. And I remember even getting a credit card in college, that whole credit card thing, which
don't do it. Don't do it.
Right. Now, I will say this, family. I did get a credit card, but I was already schooled actually by one of my older brother's friends and my family too, my mom and my dad, but really by my brother's friend, because he's like, hey man, my brother's 5 years older than me, so he's 5 years older than me as well. So he was like, look, man, when you get to the campus, they're gonna try to get you a credit card. Unless you can pay it off, unless you can play the game and know how to play it, don't do it. So
Right.
I did get one, but I kept my credit pretty solid because he already told me what the game was. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate him on that.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know.
yeah, see, and how do you know if you don't know?
Right.
I would have known if you wouldn't have
Right.
told.
Right.
And like you said, the interest in, I think the interest in was like 12%, and that was high.
Mm-hmm.
Now you like you said, now you're talking about 25, 29. They're like, are we good? No, we're not good. Like,
Right. We're not good at all.
yes.
I can't do nothing with that.
I can't do nothing with that, anything.
Right.
So, like you said, that debt that we accrue going to school, I agree with you. There's a certain limit. Fisk at that time was, I think, 12,000 and a half a year, right? This is the late 90s. And I think now it's up to 15 or 16, I think now.
Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, yeah, and here in New York, of course, the city colleges are much even cheaper than,
Yes.
they're more affordable than that, which I appreciate. And just to go back what you said earlier, Kill, with Harvard, isn't Harvard's tuition about almost like 60 grand a year, something like that?
Maybe it's there. I mean, there's so many problems with the way higher ed is structured, right? One of the things I'm thinking about as you're talking is prestige, right? I know Fisk. I also know there's 101 HBCUs, right? I can probably, and I do education and higher ed access for a living. I can probably, if I stretch really hard, name 20 of them, right? Does that mean the others are not good? No, it doesn't. It just means I don't know them, right? And I think about institutions, I think about the field of influence, right? Like y'all hyped me up coming on here. I bet you most of the people on this don't know who I am. And so it's like, and to me, colleges are kind of the same way, right? You guys, oh, he's big and fancy, right? He's got X amount of followers on Twitter. He's been like, and like all these people, like, I don't know who he is. He ain't Beyonce, right? So like, right, like to me, Harvard is kind of the Beyonce of the education world. It's glitzy. No, Harvard's the Taylor Swift. Let's not get it twisted.
Wow.
Harvard's the Taylor Swift, right? Like, and I'm sitting there going, why is anybody listening to her? Like, she ain't all that, right? Like, but she does bring in a lot of money, right? And so I think we all have to realize that. I don't know that I would say Taylor Swift is a bad musician because I'm not really equipped to evaluate music like that, right? My kids understand the difference between us, like they can hear a C versus an A, and I'm like, that's just music, right? Like that's about as deep as I can get on that. Like I'm not equipped to evaluate. I can evaluate, do I like it or not?
Yes.
Not necessarily is it good music technically, right? So Taylor Swift ain't my thing. Harvard ain't my thing, right? But for free, maybe it is. So I think we all have to evaluate what our needs, what our wants, what our likes are, and then take that into account the bigger picture, right? What do you value? What do you want? What are you looking for? Fisk has a name that carries weight in a certain field, in a certain arena, both physical location, right, but also conceptual location of there are companies that recruit at Fisk and it will help you get a job. Yeah. There are industries where the Fisk degree carries weight, right? I don't even know where Fisk is. I know it's down south somewhere. Where is Fisk?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville, Tennessee. I'm sure 9 out of 10 people in Nashville know what Fisk is. I'm also sure less than 2 out of 10 people in New York know where Fisk is. So if you're thinking about Fisk and you want your job in New York, maybe Fisk ain't gonna get you there as easily as Baruch, right? That 9 out of 10 people in New York know what Baruch is and know the value of a Baruch degree, especially if you're talking in the world of business, right? So I think what we have to realize when we're talking about these colleges, we're thinking about like this field of influence, the field of awareness, the field of opportunity, right? Everybody knows the name Harvard, so clearly that's going to carry weight in places that Fisk doesn't carry weight. Is it worth 100 grand, 200 grand in debt to you? Is it worth 70 grand in debt, right? That becomes the big question that the family has to answer, right? And I would bet, like, and let's also put it out there. I would say two things there, right? It's probably not worth 100 grand in debt to me, right? But also the whole Varsity Blues scandal, somebody says it was worth $500,000, $600,000 in bribes to them, right? That's something. I don't know what that is, but that's something.
Yes.
like
That's oof,
because you know, $500,000 laying around available for bribes. I might invest half of it in the stock market, give the rest of it to the kid, and be like, "Oh, work it out. Here's 250. If you can't make that work, I got nothing for you, kid."
Right. You can't maximize on that. Hey, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
yeah, right. Like, you got to work that out.
Yeah, goodness, man. Wow. And like I said, going to HBCU, going to that FIS experience, it was worth it. And I tell people all the time, I had minimal debt. Like I had around the debt, like you said, around the amount that you had for the most part, maybe a little lesser. I did work study in school to minimize it. My parents helped me to get certain grants and loans and things like that. And I tell people, I say, I was struggling coming out of school because I was, you're trying to find out what you're going to exactly do with your degree, and I hadn't gotten into teaching yet. So I was struggling a little bit to pay off the bills monthly, but I don't regret it at all. It was worth that debt for me. It was worth it.
And I think there's a reasonable amount of debt that we can all assume will pay off in the end. I think the conversation around college is wrong right now, right? People keep going, should you go to college, full stop. If you're going for free, everybody should go. If you want a job that requires a college degree, you should absolutely go, right? Like, that's like saying, should you buy a car? Like, you live in America, like it's set up, like in New York City, you shouldn't buy a car. That's not really a question, right? Like, well, you're good in New York City. You live outside of New York, should you buy a car is probably a non-starter.
Yes, I agree.
But should you pay for a Mercedes? Like, I don't need that kind of flex, right? Like, that's just not what I need, right? Now, we could also make that more complicated. What if I'm trying to be a sports agent? Right? I've been watching Billions on HBO of late, right? It kind of feels like to get into that world, you kind of do have to show.
Yeah.
So now it starts to become a different calculation. So I think what we have to think about is every conversation that we tend to have these days around education isn't nuanced enough. The conversations, let me say that differently. The conversations that I see around education aren't nuanced enough, right? You have to be aware who you're talking to, how nuanced they're making these discussions, right? And how well it applies to your family, right? If I have like people talk about, HBCUs don't give good packages, that's not completely true. I know people at HBCUs on full ride scholarships. Now, most people aren't.
Right.
But also HBCUs have a high level of students who need money, a high level of Pell students.
Yes, I was one of those.
So if everybody needs money, they can't give everybody the package they want. Whereas if you look at the recent reporting from Opportunity Insights, and if you look at, if you want to Google the work of Raj Chetty in the New York Times, they actually have a tool on there. You could look up colleges and see the average family income of their students.
Wow.
Right? So like you look at Harvard, average family income of students at Harvard, $171,000 a year, or some crap like that. Right? Well, okay, so they're admitting all the rich kids. They're admitting more kids from the top 1% than from the bottom 60% combined. Well, of course they got money for the one poor kid they let in. Right? So it's like, so to try to compare what HBCUs do with less money to what Harvard does with their billions of dollars. I want to say it's $40 billion, something like that. Some number that's like insane. It's the GDP of a small nation, of a large nation, damn it. Like you can't even begin to compare these things. Right? So I think that when we're thinking about colleges, what we need to think about is not is the degree worth it? Right? Is the cost, what do I want out of it, and how much can I pay to achieve that? right? That's really the question of almost all the things in life, right? What do I want out of it, and will I pay what it costs to get it?
Mm-hmm.
I saw this thing online of some dude who just paid for leg extension surgeries and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah.
I was like, I want to be taller. I'm about 6 feet. My son just passed me in height. It annoys the hell out of me. Right?
Okay. Wow.
I kind of like it, but I also am kind of annoyed. I'm like, damn. I'd like to be 6'3", 6'4".
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going through painful surgery to do it.
Mm.
And I also don't have the issue because I don't have the money to do it. So it's also not much of a question.
Right. It's like, well,
And I think you got to look at all those things that way, right? Is it worth the cost? Is it worth the pain? Is it worth the is the value worth the cost? A college degree absolutely has value and will help you get open doors that not having the degree can't open. But is it worth the cost? And it's become a much, much more important question because it's become more expensive.
Mm. Mm. Kayode over there shaking his head. He's
I'm in school, man. I'm in school. I'm a student. I'm freaking learning.
yeah. Yeah, but I know you got some questions, bro. I know you got some questions because family, we work with youth. We work with young adults. You know, I started teaching from the second, third grade level all the way up to high school, college level. And
Bless you, my man.
no,
Second grade.
that's what
it.
it was.
I got a hard limit. I will never teach anybody under fifth grade. That is a hard limit.
Oh man, it was an experience, y'all. It was an experience. It definitely trained me, you know, in difficult situations to be able to prepare to put me in. I put me in any scenario, I'm good, man. Teaching with the babies, you know, I am good. I appreciate it for what it was. I didn't appreciate it all the time when I was in it, but I appreciate it now. Like I feel
it's funny because like I know I can't teach young kids mostly because of me, not because of them. Like, as you can see, I'm easily jumping from topic to topic, right? You do that with a second grader, you're never coming back. like, you know, I can't just drop off a little bit of basketball here, a little bit of Taylor Swift there, right? Like, nah, we're never coming back. You do that with second graders.
No.
Like, yeah, it's me that's the problem, not really them.
Okay. So that's good. That's so good, simple way. That's good you know that, right? Yeah. No, that's facts. That's so thorough facts right there. Oh my goodness. Oh man. So Kayode, you got anything you wanna
Nah, yo. Akil dropped too many gems, honestly, man. I don't know where to start. Akil, thank you, brother. Thank you so much. One of the things that I do appreciate is your transparency, your honesty, your straightforwardness, the way you keep it real, and that's kind of what we value here at Grand Rising. Damn, you dropped some good stuff. I think one of the biggest questions that hit because a background to me, I teach in the city youth, right? My organization, you know, 4Ts, teaching T's to think, and I'm in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. So a lot of my exposure are to inner city youth, especially those about good 4 years is in Brooklyn, right there at Farragut Housing and Fort Greene Housing. That's right there in the center downtown, right there. You know, and you got the gangs in there, the Crips, and the gang signs and all that stuff. And when the topic of education comes up, it goes right over their head. And their only formal form of education is in high school. And then after high school, college, what? If anything, it's BMCC, which is considered 13th grade and not even college.
All of college is 13th grade. What comes to 12th grade but 13th grade? Like, I think it's kind of like college is like some rocket ship genius level study. It's freaking 13th grade. What it is.
And the terminology 13th grade comes from like it's just an extension of high school. It's not really a level up or the next level to colleges. It's how they term like community colleges because BNCC is a community college.
And that started from all these places that want to feel special. Right? They want to feel super duper special because like we're doing it differently. Now it's all like it's 13th grade. You might be doing some things at your 13th grade that others did at their 12th grade. But you know what? That happens in high school too. There's some kids who take geometry in 9th grade and some who take geometry in 11th grade.
True.
Does that mean I can't learn geometry because I didn't take it in 9th grade? That might mean that it's harder for me. Absolutely. Right? And when we went from 8th grade to 9th grade, we leveled up. So why can't we level up when we go from 12th to 13th? 13th grade ain't a pejorative. 13th grade is a descriptor. That is what it is. Right? Like, Harvard's 13th grade ain't special. It's just designed to continue a very particular educational experience. Harvard's 13th grade is modeled from the 12th grade of hoity-toity private schools. So if you didn't prepare for 12th grade at hoity-toity private schools, it will be more challenging to transition to 13th grade at hoity-toity private school. That follows, that tracks. Okay. I either got to get ready for that or I look for a different thing. Or I get ready for a shocking transition. Right? But that happens in everything. Right? If you, I don't know, if you've been playing basketball, on 150th Street Park in South Jamaica, Queens, and then you go to the Rucker, that's a transition.
That is a transition.
And I say those things because I grew up in Queens, used to play on 150th. Anthony Mason was down there one day. I was balling. I was a center in the park.
Oh, wow.
I can't go to the Rucker. Right? I could never go to the Rucker.
Oh. We in basketball right now. It's Rucker, the famed Rucker, Holcomb Rucker Court in New York. Oh man. And Mace, Tennessee State alumni, Big Mace, much
That's
love
right.
to his
love me some Mace.
Yo, man. We digress, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's a real comparison right there.
So I say all that to say we have to challenge the narratives that are put in front of us around all of these experiences, right? Specifically education, there is a mythology created around some of these places. There's a mythology created around education that is hurtful to students, to our students especially, right? Told you can't succeed at Harvard because somehow English at Harvard is super duper special and like English nowhere else in the world. Like, I refuse to believe that, right? Like, now I will grant you that there's some things that like are harder, or like the expectations might be different, right? But it's a question of, are you prepared? Can you prepare yourself? Do you understand what those expectations are, right? I know that Akil Bello, 30 years in test preparation, who can get a perfect score on every standardized test you've ever heard of. I can't go to MIT and do math that first year. They expect calculus. I haven't looked at calculus since 1991.
I ain't even looked at calculus ever. How about that?
Right. I'm not walking into a place that will ask me for calculus.
Right.
Right. And that might also be Hampton or Howard or Tennessee State or Texas Southern. I don't know what they expect of freshmen. And if they expect calculus of me, yeah, I can't do it.
Can't do it.
Right? Now, odds are Tennessee State, Texas Southern, SUNY Buffalo don't have that expectation because that's not their thing, right? They are places that are more designed to educate every 12th grader, not to cherry pick who they admit and then pretend they're the best and brightest. Right? To me, it's fascinating looking at these colleges that are, with single digit admit rates that like to bag about best and brightest. No. You went around the country and you cherry picked the students you want. You told everybody to apply. You cherry picked the ones you wanted and say, like, look, we got the best, right? Like you picked the ones you wanted. I don't know if that equates to the best because some of your criteria, legacy, can they pay full freight?
Mm.
And like, I'm not sure that defines best and brightest.
Mm.
I more appreciate a place like, Morehouse, Michigan State. Michigan State admits 80% of the people that apply there, and they graduate 80% of the people that apply there. I like me a spot that takes them all and gets them all out. You're not saying nothing if you admit 9% of your applicants. You're cherry picking those who are most prepared to start, most can afford to finish, and then you're bragging about the fact that they finished. That's like me going to the NBA, picking some people and be like, look, I got the tallest people in the world. Like, it's like Steve Nash with the Nets talking about, look, we won a lot of games. You got Katie, Harden, and Kyrie. Like, I could have won 50 games in the NBA with Katie, Harden, and Kyrie, and I ain't never coached. I would throw out the ball and be like, yo, y'all put that in the hoop. Let's score more than the other guys. Come on. Let's go. Score more than the other guys.
Got 3 assassins on your team. Like, come on. Like, oh man.
Akil, I'm glad you mentioned that. Because I didn't know where to start with the questions, man. Because you kind of covered all the bases, basically. You just keeping it real. Speaking of cherry picking students, right? And tying it into inner city youth. The question that I have that I wanted to pose to you was in terms of the affirmative action decision, right? Whereas you have the Supreme Court decided to do away with the affirmative action, and we had this discussion offline anyway, but I think this is good for us to bring it online for others can hear our perspectives on that. So you have a lot of it's mixed messages, right? Where some people feel affirmative action isn't needed anymore because, we have a black president, Barack Obama, and all that other stuff. So the question primarily is which we have here, while legacy messages, do you feel affirmative action is still needed, or was that a good decision that the Supreme Court gave in doing away with it?
Let's look at it this way. Let me just run some numbers for you. I'm not gonna answer. I'm just gonna run some numbers.
Okay.
All right. Wesleyan University admitted had their first black graduate in 1860. Wesleyan University graduated 5 black students before 1910. All right. So this is a university that's been around for years and years and years. Their first black student. University of Virginia had their first black graduate in 1959. Right. So we can estimate that University of Virginia I estimate they had about 4.9, almost 5 million white graduates since they were founded in 1819. They have estimated 5 million legacy students. Based on the number of graduates, if we project that each graduate has 2 kids, we're talking about 5 million potential legacies from University of Virginia, white legacies.
Gotcha.
There's about 55,000 potential black legacies in that same time. So ain't no way so if we are looking historically, we were excluded for how many years? Y'all should do at least that amount of time of giving us some payback. So we're actually, in this case, is actually not about affirmative action, because affirmative action was literally doing that. It was going, let's look back. Holy crap, we did some bad stuff. Let's make up for all the harm done to black people historically in this country by giving them additional consideration in admissions. That's not what's happened over the last 40 years. Because the way that colleges have used race over the past 40 years have been race conscious admissions, which is really just saying, we're going to take that in. We're not going to actively address the harms of the past. We are going to consider race among other things we consider, such as legacy admissions, such as geography, such as gender, such as all these other things they consider when they are shaping their class. And race is one of them. It's the only one that has been litigated. So what does that say about the need for addressing the racial past and present of this country? Right? So should that case have come, like, so I say all that to say, seems like we ain't fix it. So you're making it illegal before you fixed it. Right? Let's start there. Now, I think the conversation around affirmative action has been bad. Right? I think that the way they've talked about it, there has never been a Black child in this country who got into school because they are Black. Let me not say never. Maybe, and nah, never, because that's bullshit, right? Like ain't never been somebody's like, oh, let him in, he's Black. That has never, ever, ever happened. It has been, that is an exceptional person. That is an exceptional student who has achieved beyond all of the thousands of other Black students that we're considering. So this is an exceptional student that, despite the lack of resources, despite not being in a school that specifically crafts its curriculum to feed the needs of these highly rejective private schools, they still manage to stand out, right? Maybe not above and beyond all the students who've worked all their lives and invested all their money in crafting a profile that fits the desires of these highly rejected schools, right? But really good given what's happened. So maybe we'll accept them the same way that we look at rural students who didn't have access to the private schools and all of that, and we'll accept them too, right? Kids from South Dakota get into the Ivy League at a much higher rate than the general population, because the Ivy League like to brag about, we got all 50 states. I have yet to see a single lawsuit filed against geographic preferences. So let's just start with, right? They picked that one thing to object about, right? So, and the dude behind that suit, it's actually not Asians behind the suit. It's a white dude behind the suit. The same white dude that was behind Becky with the bad grades.
I'm very honored, and we've got more work to do, but I'm looking forward to the next steps in this process. Of course, we're happy with it, but you know, they gave us everything that we asked for, and I'm very confident that UT won't be able to use race in the future.
If y'all remember that, right? Technically the Fisher trial, Abigail Fisher, but Twitter dragged her for filth, and it was beautiful. There was a hashtag Becky with the bad grades, which was just beautiful. Because Texas has a rule that is basically, if you're in the top 10% of your graduating class, you're automatically admitted to UT, to the UT system,
Okay.
to the public institutions in Texas. Becky wasn't automatically admitted. She did not qualify. She wasn't top 10% of her class. And then they admit other students for other criteria after the top 10%. Right. So about 75% of their class at UT Austin was filled with top 10%. And then there's a whole bunch of other students.
Wow.
I want to say that there were 49 Black and brown students who got in with worse grades than Becky. There was maybe 300 white kids who got in with worse grades than Becky. Notice what the lawsuit was about. So the guy behind this, Ed Blum, has a very particular axe to grind. He doesn't want any acknowledgement of race, specifically Black folks, in this country. He also is behind a lot of lawsuits around voter rights. Right? Specifically, disenfranchising Black folks. So this is a dude with a very particular axe to grind who gets behind other people, right, to try to prevent any consideration of Blackness. He just filed a lawsuit against a venture fund that was specifically set up to fund Black female entrepreneurs.
Wow.
So that's the context of this case. So anybody who tells you affirmative action isn't necessary is choosing to ignore all that context.
Many more.
Right? And don't throw out the one magical Black man who happened to achieve and try to say that that works, right? Like, let's not talk about the outlier and pretend that it's representative of everyone.
Of everyone, yeah.
Right? That's BS. That's a false narrative, right? That you have, right?
False limited.
That you have, who's that Republican dude, Tim Scott, right? Trying to drag out all that nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's like trying to say, you know, oh yeah, sure, people can make it in the NBA. Look, Muggsy Bogues was there.
Spud Webb.
Right, Spud Webb, right. We can name all three of the guys of the 5,000 people who've been in the NBA historically. We can name the three that were under 5'6". So if you're under 5'6", you're good to go.
Right.
It's like, come on. Come on.
Yeah, these half truths that they like to say, these kind of exceptions to the rule that they make as like the typical, oh, this is typical, this happens all the time. No, it doesn't.
Right. And they actually, and what's funny is that they're careful about that, right? They don't usually say that it's typical, they just let you carry it, right? Mm-hmm. They go, right, you can make it to the NBA short. Look, Spud Webb did, right? Which is not a false statement.
Right.
It is a deceptive statement.
Yes.
It's a deceptive statement that creates a false narrative, right? And in education, they do that a lot. You read the New York Times, they talk about college, right? But if you look at the headlines, and I actually broke this down on Twitter, I went through like a year and a half of headlines from the New York Times. And let's say that there were 30 stories about education, 19 of them are about Harvard.
Wow.
You write about Harvard and you say college, that's a lie. Right? Harvard ain't college. New York Times doesn't write about education. New York Times writes about Harvard, and sometimes it talks about other places. Right. And Harvard, you might as well be talking about Hogwarts. Right? Like, no, seriously, like it's a tiny little place that admits, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 of the 4 million students that go to college every year. Right? Like, what is it? UCLA admits more students than the entire Ivy League.
Wow.
Hell, maybe SUNY Stony Brook might admit more students than the entire Ivy League. So don't talk to me about the Ivy League. Talk to me about Stony Brook.
Oh, man.
Oof.
You know, listen, this conversation.
And I'm not saying those places are bad, right? If Harvard sent the car to get me and said, come be a student here for free, I'm going. Probably, maybe. I have to think about that. Like, no, seriously, like Harvard for free, Morehouse for $5,000 a year. If that, like, I have a senior in high school right now. If those were the offers in front of us, we would be having a deep conversation about which one.
Well, hold on, then. What's the difference?
And that's real.
What sets Harvard above an HBCU, really? Besides its name, is it offered besides connections?
Okay. Well, that's network. The starting and I don't even know if the network is legit, right? Especially for us, right? Let me say that better, because I don't want anyone to walk away with thinking I'm saying these places are bad.
Okay.
Right. Let me say it better. I think of these places the same way I think of Kanye's shoes, the Crocs he makes. Ain't no way I'm letting somebody pay for those Crocs. Right? Because like they're not better than Crocs, right? But they're a hell of a lot more. And they also represent a brand I'm not behind. I'm not endorsing Kanye in any way, shape, or form. So you can't sport Kanye's Crocs. They also cost too much. They're kind of ugly. Right? Now, they're probably fine as a shoe, right? They're better than the Payless Crocs. They're better than the Walmart Crocs.
Okay.
Right? But are they better than real Crocs? Right? If I want a shoe to walk around in and maybe put in sport mode, right? Like, are they better than real Crocs? are all the implications of endorsing Kanye work. Like, I don't know that it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that like it's a lot of the same question. Like, is it a better education? I'm not sure. It is definitely not a bad education.
Okay.
Right. But all of the intangibles that they try to sell you on, the network, right? That's the country club effect. What do you have to sell to become part of that? Right? Who are you networking with? Does that accrue to us as Black people as easily as it does to the rich people who are 90% of the people who are in that school? They came in with that network. When daddy's CEO of XYZ, is it Harvard that creates the network or is it daddy that creates the network? Right? Now, there is absolutely a value to the degree. If I walk into a place and say, hey, Fisk, hey, Harvard, guaranteed more people have heard of Harvard.
Right.
Will that translate to them giving you a job?
Facts.
Good question. I don't know. If I had if all things are equal, most of us will say it's safer to take Harvard. Safer just in terms of just brand.
Yes.
Right? Not safer in terms of your experience on campus. We're not going to talk about that yet. Right?
Beautiful experience.
That's a whole different story, right? Like,
true.
You know, if we're going to start to measure things like, I don't know, probability of being called the N-word, that's a different calculation. Right?
Right.
With the hard ER, not the A, right? With the hard ER, right?
Tallahassee coach.
So,
yes. Let them know.
America's still going to America.
Right.
So it's a complicated question that you have to sit down as a family and try to navigate.
Akil, I have a question for you. If a black candidate for a job, a white candidate for a job, black candidate, because they did this study, you know about this study regarding a white candidate that has a criminal background record compared to a black candidate that doesn't have a criminal background record, that white candidate will get called back more than a black candidate would in that type of scenario. Question, you have a black candidate with a Harvard degree and a white candidate without a Harvard degree applying for the same position. Who's going to get the job?
I don't know.
In your opinion.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. the people who hold up these, elitist spaces as the solver of racial inequalities in America want you to believe it's Harvard. I don't know. I would love to see them do that research. And I feel like it might have been done. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I feel like too.
Usually when they do those kind of studies, they do equal credentials. Right? They do equal credentials. Or they study the credentials without factoring in race. That's the problem with almost all of those studies, right? They'll do one or the other. They won't usually combine both, right? That's a great question that you present, right? And it's also usually not a black candidate, right? It's a black sounding name. Right? Because that's really all they have to go on, like, or black indicators on the resume. Right. So you have assumptions and biases going in to start with.
Right.
And it's a question of, so like essentially what you're asking is Harvard a shield against racism?
Yes. Good way. Good. There you go. Yes.
Real question.
Yes. Yes. So based on
America go to America.
So even though we don't have the studies and the statistics and the data, right, because we don't have any conclusive evidence that this has been done, would it be fair or safe to say, based on the historical context of this country and based on the internal subconscious biases that people have, that we can pretty much, I don't want to say the term, but assume, right, because you assume you make an ass out of you, that whole thing. Would it be pretty much to assume that the white candidate would get the benefit of the doubt or hired, even though that black candidate does have a Harvard degree and the white candidate doesn't?
Let's do this instead. Let's flip it.
Okay.
What do you do about it? Right? You can't do nothing about it, right? You can't control what they do. So I think the more important questions for families are, if those choices are in front of me, right? Harvard, Princeton, whatever, USC versus Spelman, Morehouse, Hampton, Fisk, I have to consider all of that, right? Which is why for us, I think college admissions and college education is more complicated than it is for a lot of others, right? You know, a fancy hoity-toity degree is not going to increase racism. It may not be a shield against it, but it won't make it worse. So there is that. So now it comes down to the question of, do I want to go there and experience that? Or do I want to go somewhere else? And I think a friend of mine, Shareem Herndon Brown, he just wrote a book, Black Families Guide to College Admissions.
Okay.
Right? And I think the way Shareem frames it is, do you want to go somewhere where you're celebrated or somewhere where you're tolerated? And that's interesting, right? That's an interesting conversation.
It's a very interesting conversation.
If you have that choice. So I think for us, the question is to create as much choice as possible and then make decisions. I would love to be in the situation where every college in the country is bidding for my son. That's a position of power.
Yes, it is.
Like, who's gonna make the best offer? Now we're talking about Morehouse, you know, Morehouse for $5,000 a year, Harvard for zero, Princeton for 10, right? All right, Princeton, you lose. right? Like, you out. Right? So like, you know, yeah. Duke for $2,000 a year, but a spot on the no, Duke for $20,000 a year, but a spot on the basketball team. Right? Now it's getting complicated, right? It's like, oh, Morehouse for free, a spot on Duke's basketball team. It's like, oh, right? Like, so, like, ideally, we're in a position of power where we get to line up these offers and make some choices. Now, in truth, there's not a whole lot of chance of like those beautiful offers being the one in front of us, right? Usually, we're making choices of, you know, school X for $30,000, school Y for $36,000.
Yeah.
Right? So, the goal is to do all you can to increase your opportunities, to do all you can to increase your options. I'd rather my son be offered admission to 5 colleges and choose not to go than not be able to go to college.
Okay.